Good morning, everyone. I see that I'm 1 minute earlier, but there are people already here and there are questions already here. So we will just get started. Hi, everyone. Oh, quick. Let me put do not disturb on. There we are. Um, if you are new here, hi, I'm Casey. I am a professor and I've been running PhD admissions in my department for a very long time, and I make videos here on YouTube about academic life and advice for graduate students, etc. Though certainly my most popular videos have been around advice for applying to PhD programs, and I imagine that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. But I am totally happy to take any kinds of questions related to academia, graduate school, etc. I will go through questions in the order that they are appearing on the chat. If I accidentally miss one, sometimes the chat suddenly scrolls down to the bottom and I have to find my place. Anyway, if I miss a question, feel free to ask it again. Okay, let's see. So, do you have advice on how to reject offer? Oh, what a good question. And I'll try to remember to read the questions for people, especially who are watching this later. Do you have any advice on how to reject offers? When rejecting a program, should one mention which program they will be attending instead? How do you feel, when a student chooses not to accept your offer, especially for offers from programs where one might have created a personal connection with faculty during visit day, email messaging, and meetings? So this is a wonderful question. And as you say, I did not have this experience because I only applied to one PhD program, but I did have this experience when I was on the job market. I had a job offer that I was incredibly excited about, and that people there that I know had pulled for me and had taken time to help me. And then it was, it's actually quite similar to turning down a job offer. So the first thing that I would say is that this is a thing that happens and everyone knows that that it happens. The most important thing for making a decision about a PhD program is that you go to the best place for you. And I would like to think, so, this is me talking from my own experience and my own perspective, but I would like to think that the vast majority of faculty members feel the same way that I do here, which is that if you choose to go to a different PhD program, it's not personal. It doesn't mean someone dislikes you or that they think the program is bad. I mean, usually not. But especially in the situation where you're saying it seems like you feel bad that you're turning down this offer. And that's gonna happen. And no one will be mad at you. um, it's similar to, we also turn down applicants. We turn down applicants who are amazing and that we talk to. In fact, my program does visit days before we have finalized admissions offers, and so sometimes we turn down students who were at our visit days. So it's very similar. And so, first of all, don't be like, of course you're going to be a little bit nervous, but don't worry that like someone's going to hate you or you're burning a bridge for later in your career, that sort of thing. These things happen. Um, and I'm thinking in particular of like our very first time that we admitted PhD students. And I'm thinking about this because I had a wonderful interaction with this person recently. There was a student that turned down an offer to come work with me. She went somewhere else. It was probably a good call. She did amazing. Now she's a professor. And we are still colleagues. It didn't impact my relationship with this. I didn't really know them, but you see what I mean. So to answer your question specifically, how should you do it? You should tell them. You should not like, if you've had a personal interaction with a professor and you're turning down their offer for admission in their PhD program, you probably should send them an email and let them know, as opposed to like waiting for them to like, whatever way you do it in the system to like officially reject the offer. That is and that's kind of all you need to do. Um, the question, should you tell them where you're going instead? I would say that's up to you. I like it when people do that because I just I'm if we've made an offer of admission to someone, we think they're great and we like them, and I would like to follow their career and I would like to know what they do. I mean, you're going to find out anyway, probably because you're in the same field. Um, it can also be useful for sort of our admissions process and statistics and that sort of thing to know like what programs we're sort of competing against, but you don't have to if you're not comfortable doing that. So I guess my answer to your question is you should tell them, you should be nice about it, and you should expect them to be nice in return. All right, next question. I've been waitlisted to your dream program and have also been admitted to other places. What should you do till April 15th if you don't hear anything from your dream school? All right. So, first of all, let me say something about waitlists because a lot of people wonder sort of what does a waitlist mean? And I don't know for certain that this is absolutely the same everywhere. But based on my knowledge of sort of how waitlist works, a common reason for there to be a wait list is because the program is being a little bit risk averse in terms of wanting to make sure that too many students don't come. Um, when you make offers of admission, you know that not everyone is going to come. Just sort of like and this is again is why like turning down an offer of admission shouldn't make you feel bad. Like they know not everyone's going to come. I mean, I've got to tell you, like we've had like spreadsheets with like guesses of the odds of someone coming, and sometimes it's 95% and sometimes it's 20%. We're just guessing, but that can change how many offers you make. And so, if you're worried that more students might accept your offer of admission than you're expecting, you might put some people on a wait list. And the idea is that if students turn you down and you have more capacity, you can let people in off of the wait list. But that takes time because technically everyone else also has until April 15th to decide. This is also a reason why once you've made your decision, and this goes back to the previous question, if you have actually made a decision, you have decided where you're going to go, or if you're deciding, let's say you're deciding between two places, but you have three offers and the third one you're not going to go there. As soon as you know you're not going to go there, it is a kindness to tell them. And this is part of the reason why, because it might mean that there's a wait list and they can let someone off of the wait list if they have wait lists. Or it can just help faculty in planning or that sort of thing. So I would really encourage you, if you have an offer and you know you're not going to take it, tell them as soon as you can. You don't have to, you're not required to, but that is a kindness. So that's often what a wait list is. So the answer to what should you do, I mean, you're not required to give an answer to decide where you're going to go if you don't get in there. Like you might as well think through that, make that decision, get all the information that you need, and make the decision between those other two places, right? Wait, didn't you say you had two? Yes. So you might as well go ahead and decide between those two places where would you want to go. And then that allows you to turn down one of those offers if you're really sure. And then kind of all you can do is wait. You could contact, respond to the wait list and say, I just want you to know that if this is true, I just want you to know that your program is my top choice. And if I am admitted off of the wait list, I would almost certainly come. I do have two other offers, and so at some point I will have to make a decision and accept one of those offers if I haven't heard anything from you. So that's kind of all you can do. And then again, the other places can't require you to make decisions prior to April 15th. Oh, someone else has two offers. I have an offer from two universities. One of them is a higher ranking one, but there are not many faculty who are particularly interested in you. But the lower ranking university has a great PI who you'd love to work with. The only problem is that it's not a guarantee that you'll work with him if you chose that program. What factors do I suggest you take into consideration? Okay. So I feel like I should always caveat this kind of thing that these are my personal perspectives and based on my experiences. But as I have said before, I tend to think that the ranking of the program, within some margin of error for a PhD is not as important as like the work that you're able to do and the advisor that you work with if you're in like a lab-based field where advisor fit is really important. Um, that said, I'm not gonna pretend there's not like some amount of elitism and everything about academia. But if you go to Harvard and I'm just picking that as an example of a highly ranked school. If you go to Harvard and you have an advisor that doesn't really do what you want to do and they're not particularly excited about working with you and you end up doing something that you don't want to do or you don't do as much or you're not able to publish or whatever reason that you do not produce as much as a PhD student as you might have otherwise or you're doing work that you're not passionate about, etc. So we've got that person and we've got someone who goes to, you know, lower ranked school. University of Colorado, which is where I am, I assume is like does not look as good on paper as Harvard. Um, but you go to University of Colorado, you have a really supportive advisor who's doing exactly what you want to do, and you're really excited and you published a lot. Um, when you graduate, you're going to look better than the person at Harvard that did not do as well, right? This isn't like I sometimes compare this to law school because if you were asking me where should I go to law school, I would tell you go to the best ranked school you can get into. And one of the reasons is because law school, like the law profession is particularly elitist, but also there isn't as much that you do in law school to sort of distinguish yourself. Like law school is based on grades, right? Like how well do you do in your classes, your grades? Like maybe you have the chance to write a law review article, maybe you have a cool internship or whatever, but it's based on grades. And people assume that it's harder to get an A at a law school class in Harvard than it is at University of Colorado. Now, whether that's true, I who knows. But the point is there isn't as much to sort of distinguish yourself. But in a PhD, you are doing research and you're publishing, and that's what you're being evaluated on, not like grades. And so if you have issues of resources potentially aside, the work that you do should be what's important as opposed to the name of the university. That said, highly ranked programs sometimes have more resources. Some, again, some margin of error. Sometimes, you know, more prestigious faculty go to more prestigious programs, but not always. So I'm not saying that this kind of thing doesn't matter at all, just that it's probably not the most important thing. Again, my perspective. The issue of like you're not guaranteed to work with a particular advisor, that I'm not quite sure how to advise you on, except that you might like just ask them like what are the odds that I might be able to work with you, because it might just be a oh we can't guarantee on paper, but the person is like yeah but it'll be fine. Or it might be issues of capacity, it might be that they're waiting to hear about a grant or whatever. um and I'm guessing that I'm going to get a lot of questions like this during this live because congratulations everyone who's deciding between more than one offer. That's very exciting. um it's really hard for me to give people specific advice on where to choose to go between two programs because It's just such a like people's priorities and values and individual situations are so different that there's just no way that I can give individual advice on that. I can just tell you things that you might want to think about in making the decision for yourself. All right, next question. Do you have any advice on publishing as an undergrad, how to publish and what to expect? So, um, this question might differ a bit depending on your field. Because you're asking about publishing as an undergrad, I'm going to make the assumption that you're probably in something STEM or STEM adjacent. If you're like an English major, or something like that, I'm gonna tell you, like, I think it's pretty unusual for undergrads to publish, and probably what you should try to do is, like, do an honors thesis in your field. If you are in a lab-based discipline, like STEM fields or some social sciences, um, I was an undergrad in psychology, for example, and I published, you should get involved in a research lab. Um, And then what typically happens is that you get involved in a project that is being led by, for example, a graduate student, and then you help on it and get to go through the research process and the paper writing process, and you become like an author on that paper, somewhere in the squishy middle. And then, especially like once you've done that, if you get started on that sort of early enough, it's possible that again, depending on your field and how common this is, that maybe, you could lead a small project of your own. Um, or like, and again, another way to do this is to like do an honors thesis and make sure that, when you're picking a faculty advisor for your honors thesis, it's or something, whatever that's called, something like that, where you do an independent research project as an undergrad, talk to your faculty advisor about whether they think this could be publishable and whether they would help you do that. So, for example, right now I'm advising the honors thesis of a computer science undergrad at my university. And I think this project is like, she's doing this great interview study. Um, she only has a couple more months to finish it, so there's no way that it's gonna be like a publishable ready paper. Like, the thesis that she defends in a couple of months isn't gonna be publishable yet, but she wants to publish, and so I have told her that I will keep working with her so that she can finish this project and make it publishable. So that's the kind of conversation you might wanna have too. Um, oh, sorry, and there it goes, scrolling down to the bottom, and now I find my place again. I was recently accepted into a PhD in finance, but I don't know what to do now and how to prepare. Um, you're welcome. Um, how to prepare. Okay, so my assumption is you say you've been accepted and you're going to take it. So, congratulations, you are going to be a PhD student in the fall. What do you do now? Um, Probably nothing. Again, with some margin of error. So, I have a video about this. It's called like "What to Do in the Summer Before You Start Your PhD" or something. I don't remember. Um, and my major piece of advice is enjoy your last moments before you're a PhD student. But you should, if you know who your advisor is going to be, you might reach out to them and ask them if there's anything that you should do. My hope is they've probably say no. um, but you might, if okay. So there's sort of a couple of different things here. One is like you really want to do something because you're so excited, right? And you want to like ride this wave of excitement. If that's the case, I would suggest reading things in your field. What is the thing that you are interested in? What's your research area going to be? Spend the summer reading stuff. It should be fun. It should like, keep up your excitement, but you don't have sort of the pressure of like, the reasons that you often read when you're in a PhD, which is you're doing it for class or you're doing lit review or whatever. So it could just be fun. Um, and that's kind of all I can think of unless your program tells you that you should do something. Um And some people are just saying thank you. You're very welcome and congratulations. It's one of my favorite parts of doing all of this is around this time of year when people start contacting me and telling me that I helped them get into PhD programs, and it just makes me so happy. Let's see. Next question. What is the date of master's degree expedition important? I did it 2 years ago. I don't quite understand this question, but I think what you're asking is when you're applying to PhD programs, does it matter when you finished your master's degree? And I think the answer is no. I don't see why that would matter. Um, how long does it take for an I-20 to be issued? I'm going I do not know the answer to this. I'm going to confess I don't know what an I-20 is. I'm guessing maybe it has something to do with immigration for students who are going to get a PhD in another country. That's just my guess. And I have absolutely no idea. I'm sorry. Should you choose a dissertation topic that is aligned with what your professor is working on? Um, if you can do research on your own, why would the professor want to fund you? Um, okay, so I don't know. So I'm gonna explain a little bit about dissertation topics or research topics generally as they apply to like the your advisor and some things about how PhD funding sometimes works. So everything that I'm about to say, I do not know if this applies to you. I don't know what discipline you're in. I don't know what the funding model is in your program, what country your PhD is in, et cetera. So everything I'm about to say it may or may not apply to you, but I'm going to tell you if I were going to answer this question for like someone in my program, here's how I would answer it. Um, so also if you all want to dig into this more, I do have a video about PhD funding models, which again vary a lot. So this is something, a lot of the questions that you guys ask me, you would get much better answers if you asked, the grad director in in the program that you're going to, because you want to make sure that you have the actual right answers for you. But I can tell you how this would work in my program. So in the United States, um, and in lab-based, mostly STEM, but also again disciplines. Um, Students tend to be funded, PhD students tend to be funded on a combination of research assistantships and teaching assistantships. Um, and how much someone is doing one or the other is going to depend on a lot of things, including whether their advisor has money and what that money and what that grant funding is for. So, you know, for my students, for example, it's really common for them to be a teaching assistant at the beginning. And this means that their funding is coming through that teaching assistantship. And so their research that they're doing can be whatever they want, um, at least as it pertains to funding. And then what is great is if after, eventually their advisor or sometimes a different faculty, like I've funded students who aren't my advisees on my research grants before. Um, Someone has research funding where you can be a research assistant. And when that is the case, you do research that is related to that grant. It might not be like and depending on the kind of grant, there might be a lot of flexibility on the kind of research that you do. So an example that I like to use of this is that one of my PhD students, I funded her on a grant that I have that is related to research ethics for public data. That's like a big area, done lots of different things with it. She already had an existing interest in studying Black Twitter. And so she did a research study where she talked to people on Black Twitter about how they felt about researchers using their tweets without their consent. So that was a topic that she was interested in, but I made it relevant to my research grant so that the research that she was doing under that grant was of interest to her and related to her stuff that she might do for her dissertation. And of course, the dream is that you get funding for exactly what the student wants to do for their dissertation. Harder and harder to do, but that's a possibility. So, my answer to your question, given all the context that I just gave you, if again you are in a program kind of like mine, is that sometimes you're going to be doing research that is yours and you should be able to sort of pick. I mean, again, it's slightly different in different disciplines, like, and also different advisors. Like, what kind of work they're willing to advise and how far afield from what they're doing it is. Like if someone came into my lab and was like, what I really want to do is information visualization cognitive science theory, I would be like, that is super interesting. Let's find you an advisor who knows anything about that. But as far as funding goes, it might be that you're doing a project, for funding, and then your dissertation research is separate. You might choose because it might make things easier for you, and it might make you go faster to shift your dissertation interests such that they fit something that there's money for, so that you're getting paid to do your dissertation. So that is also a thing that can happen. And also students sometimes get external fellowships, so then they're basically getting paid to do their dissertation. Anyway, that's sort of the dream. But anyway, I hope that helped answer your question. Again, it's very contextual to how different funding models and different programs work. Someone hasn't received notification from universities yet, and you're feeling frustrated. What can you do? Unfortunately, there's not really anything you can do but wait. There isn't a standard timeline for these things. Different programs do things differently. But until you have a rejection, that is good news. A rejection is bad news, and anything else is not a rejection yet. So there's really all you can do is wait. If there is a point at which you need to know, and that might be, for example, because you get an acceptance and you want to have heard from other places, then you can contact them and ask. Or if there's some other reason that you need to know, or if you've heard from every other single place but not one and it's getting late, you can always ask. You can always email someone and ask for the status of your application. Someone applied to only one school and the program is saying it's under review. What should you do? No interviews. Any advice? And my advice is the same. There's not really anything you can do but wait. I know that this is frustrating. I know that waiting sucks. I personally feel bad making people wait. But there isn't really anything that I can tell you to do. So far been accepted to one program and invited to a campus visit. Should you go, and what specifically should you look for on the day? Okay. So if you've been invited to a campus visit and it is a program that you are seriously considering going to, it's not like you should go unless there's a reason for you not to go. So, maybe you have concerns about COVID or something else that you really don't want to go. In that case, you should tell them, ask about it, ask if there are virtual options or something that you could do, and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want to go. Oh, I'm also assuming that they're paying for it. Because another reason to not go if they weren't paying for it would be that you don't want to spend the money, which again, you should talk to them about it and ask if there are other options. But otherwise, I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't go. And what should you look for on the day? I have a whole video about this. I think it's like PhD admissions visits something in the title. If you want to hear 20 minutes of me talking about this, but the short version is, they're trying to, if you've already been accepted, they want you to come. So it's an opportunity to learn more about the program, to learn more about the students who are already there, to ask questions, etc. And that's a great position to be in. Let's see. Oh, sorry. There ended up being a question in between two. So the person who said, that you haven't been admitted yet, but advisors are happy to work with you. So, same kind of answer. I don't really know what to tell you to do, except that, if as time passes, you might reach out to those professors and ask if they know anything about how application review is going. Let me find my place again. How many programs should I apply for during the PhD application process? Biology is the topic. You plan to apply to 30 to 35 programs. Oh, wow. That's a lot. Okay, I don't okay, wait, let me take that back. That would be a lot in my field, but my field's a bit narrower. Um, so, my usual advice for applying to PhD programs is only apply to places that you would actually want to go. If there's a place where you're like, if I got rejected from every single place except for this one, I would rather wait and try again next year instead of going to this place. That's where you make the cutoff. Um, a lot of people talk about like, oh, I applied to 10 places and I got into my last choice. Should I go there? And I'm like, and if the answer is no, then I'm like, why did you apply there? Right? So if there are 35 programs that you would legitimately go to and you think would be good, and you can afford the application fees for 35 programs, which is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money. And you have the time to commit to writing personalized statements of purpose to 35 programs, then cool. But that's where I would cut it off, is places that you don't actually want to go to. How do PhD admissions work? Is an interview mandatory to select a student? If you don't get an interview by March, does that mean you won't be selected? So this is going to be different everywhere. Some places do interviews and some places don't. Some places do formal interviews and some places do um, professors just talking to people they might want to advise. Timelines are different everywhere. So unfortunately, there's just no way to know except to, say something I said a few minutes ago, which is that if you haven't been rejected yet, you haven't been rejected yet, and that's good. Someone has a master's degree in bioinformatics. Can you do a PhD in bioethics? What are the chances of getting accepted? So what are the chances of getting accepted is something that I can't ever answer for anyone. Um, and a sort of the issue between like a slight, like, this actually doesn't feel like a huge shift in fields to me. Like bioinformatics to bioethics seems like a totally reasonable path. Um, so so I guess that's all I can say about that. um, Someone got an offer but not the official funding letter. You got an email from your PI saying that he could help you make a decision. Is it common to ask you to decide before informing you about assistantships? Um, Interesting question. So I think no, it would not be normal to ask you to decide, but you don't have to decide yet. Well, okay. If you're in the US, you probably don't have to decide yet because there's that like agreement that everyone will wait until April 15th. Um, it also could be that the PI doesn't know that you haven't gotten a funding letter. I don't know what this means for this particular program, but no, you shouldn't decide until you know something about funding. And if you need to decide already and you don't know that yet, you should ask. A university sent an email a month ago telling you that you got in, and then they sent another email telling you it was an error. Ugh, I've seen this a couple of times on Reddit, and like, I feel so bad for you. Like, I also feel like I feel kind of bad for the program because that is a screw up that I'm sure someone feels very, very badly about. So I'm sorry that happened. That's crappy. Um, should you email them and ask? Uh, the details to the application is a day after the deadline. Okay, so uh, based on everything you've said here, especially the like, oh, it looks like the system thinks you submitted it late. Yeah, send them an email and just, I mean, if it says it's pending, it's probably pending. But if you're worried about this, you could always send an email and just say, I noticed, that even though I submitted my application on time, the date is a day later. I just wanted to double check that my application is under review. um, Sorry, finding my place again. Someone has a master's with honors, 3 years of work experience, stats. Hard to get an interview with the supervisor. What are you doing wrong? The answer might be nothing. The answer might be that you're doing nothing wrong at all. If you haven't seen, so I've got a few different videos where I talk about this. One is the like, why are applicants rejected video. And the last point in that video is sometimes it's bad timing or bad luck. Um, and sometimes that's just the answer. So I'm afraid there definitely is no way for me to know this, and there probably isn't any way for you to know this, unfortunately. I also have a video that's sort of like, I was rejected from everywhere. What should I do now? And it has, some suggestions for thinking about this. Um, Someone just did your first PhD interview, and the panel asked if you had any questions, and you asked, "How is the PhD going to be funded? Should you be worried you asked the wrong question?" I mean, that is a perfectly reasonable. So A, that's a reasonable question to ask, and B, even if it wasn't, it's done. But no, I don't think that that's like something you should, obsess over, that you made a mistake. It's a totally reasonable question to ask. Um, you were asked to apply for a PhD program by a professor in January, and you received a few admits in February. So you informed that prof about your offers, and he hasn't replied. Oh, sorry. Then he replied that he can't offer. Is it okay to email them back and ask to consider your application? Um, so okay, if I am reading this correctly, someone asked you to apply, but then they later told you that they can't admit you. Should you email them back and ask them to reconsider? Is that the question? I mean, if they said they can't make you an offer this year, there's probably a reason for that. I mean, if you want to email back and say, "Hey, I have these two other offers, so I just wanted to be absolutely sure that there's no offer coming from here because this is my top choice." You could do something like that. Someone is asking about rotations. You would like to rotate. Oh wait. Oh, so let me see. I would like to to do a rotation while many programs say the direct admission has higher chance. Any advice? I don't quite understand this question. This might just be that this is a model that I'm unfamiliar with. I mean, I'm familiar with, so I'm thinking of like one particular PhD program in my field where I know that something they do is admit students and then they rotate between different labs for a year and then pick an advisor. Um, I think that's cool. That also probably suggests a different kind of funding model than we have in our department, for example. Uh, but I'm not sure. Like usually, like a program either does that or they do admission with this particular advisor, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it would look like for it to be one or the other. So I think I don't understand this situation enough to be able to offer any advice. Sorry. What do you think of a potential advisor who blamed you after you rejected his offer? I mean, if someone so here's another thing about like rejecting offers. If a professor is a jerk to you when you reject an offer, wow, you dodged a bullet. Like if someone's going to have that reaction, imagine what they would be like as an advisor. So, good for you. Like made the right choice clearly. Um someone said my way of explaining things is good. Oh, that's nice. I'm glad to hear that. um And, again, I'm happy to hear from everyone who got into their dream schools and wants to credit me for that. I mean, it wasn't actually me. But I'm very happy to hear that from everyone. Um, Initial steps regarding ooh, is this a follow-up to a previous question? Ooh, okay, let me see if I can understand this without knowing the context. Initial steps regarding the whole procedure. Mailed some professors matching your profile, but no one replied. What to do in a better manner? Um, so I think so. I can't answer this. I mean, and to some degree, like I have no idea. You know, I can't give you any advice on how to send a better email or whatever if that's even the problem, which it probably isn't. But I do have a video about like possible ways to email potential advisors in case that's helpful. But I wouldn't take not hearing back as some kind of like absolute indicator of something bad. I often recommend that if you haven't heard back in a week or two, you can follow up once. So if you haven't done that, you might as well. Um, and other than that, I'm not really sure what advice to give there. Um, does self plagiarism and SOP affect chances if you use content from masters for PhD? Do you mean at the same universe? So the general answer to this is no. Who cares? The only exception I can possibly think of to that is if you're applying to a PhD program in the same place that you applied to a master's program, and you're afraid that you're going to remember that your statement of purpose is the same. And even then, I feel like, I don't know if like the same people are going to be reading it, or also this is probably like 2 years later, so they're probably not going to remember. So like it's probably fine. I mean, but you should make sure. But the other thing is, you should make sure that the statement of purpose is appropriate for a PhD program and not a master's program, and also that it's sort of been updated because you should be different now than when you were applying to master's programs. um, so, oh, someone is suffering from the depression of a paper rejection from Kai, revise and resubmit, and you can't help doubting yourself because it's your first paper. Oh, I so first of all, I'm sorry. Though it's kind of nice to have someone in here asking about like I'm like I feel like I want to do these kinds of things talking about general grad school advice and not just PhD admissions, but even when I do this like not at the height of PhD admission season, that's like most of what the questions I get. So anyway, happy to answer this question. And for those of you who aren't aware, Chi is a major conference in my field. I was, in fact, I was an AC for Chi this year. And it can be particularly gutting to get a rejection after you revised a paper. So let me say a few things here. One is, if you haven't seen it, I have a video on like dealing with academic rejection. I did made it so long ago that I don't even remember exactly what I said in it, but maybe it would be useful. The you're asking how you should cope. And this applies to also all of you who are getting rejections for PhD programs and this kind of thing. Like, this feeling of rejection, it's not going away. You're going to get rejected over and over and over again in academia. This is part of what it means to be an academic. Um, it's just how it is. I get rejections all the time. I get paper rejections, I get grant rejections, I get PhD students rejecting the offer to come work with me. I am constantly rejected. So if it is any comfort, and I have to say that when I was a PhD student, I actually did find some comfort in realizing at some point that even the luminaries in my field were constantly getting Chi papers rejected. Like, there are people that like. Okay, actually, I'm just going to give you a specific example and hope that he doesn't. Why? No, never mind. Why would he ever watch this? Like, Cliff Lampy is the current general chair of Chi. Like, this is a very like well-known person in our field. I'm sure you know who that is. I remember like and this was years ago, him like making a Facebook post or something about getting 3 out of 3 Chi papers rejected. Same thing. Like, I can name most like senior people in our field who occasionally will tweet about getting 3 out of 3 Chi papers rejected, right? Like, it's just everyone's getting rejected all the time. It happens. There's also a huge amount of randomness in the review process, so it might not even mean anything about the quality of your work. And if your paper was good enough to get a revise and resubmit, which was a low number of papers, 100% it's going to get in. It's going to get in somewhere else. I had a paper win an honorable mention at CCW 2 years ago. 1 year, I don't know. Anyway, at some point, it was rejected from CCW twice before that, and then it got accepted, like basically with no revisions, and won an award. And I had almost made no changes between that submission and the one where it won an award. And the reason is I had a different set of reviewers. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. But congratulations on getting that far because that means it's a good paper and it's gonna get accepted somewhere. So just keep trying. Um, Someone was rejected from amazing research group because you got nervous while talking and you wanted to apply again. Okay, first of all, you don't know that it's because you got nervous while talking. It could even be part of that like bad luck, bad timing thing. So don't blame yourself. Don't assume reasons for rejection. Like, we're finishing up admissions in my department right now. And like, we had a faculty meeting recently and like talked about, everyone on the short list and like conversations about like, oh, these people are so like seriously. There might have been someone in a room talking about how crazy amazing you are, but unfortunately, there's capacity problems or funding problems or whatever, right? So don't assume that you did something wrong. Um, the answer is should you apply again? Um, so if you don't have any other offers, and so um the question is well, okay, if you have other offers or you might have other offers if you haven't heard yet, then your decision is do you want to go to this place or do you want to wait and roll the dice and see if you can get in somewhere better, or you go to the place that you aren't as excited about but you get a PhD um sooner. um if you didn't get in anywhere, then the question, whether you want to try again, it's sort of up to you. Like, how much do you want it? Are there other things you want to do, etc.? But if you're going to try again, I actually don't think there's necessarily a downside to applying to the same place. I mean, you might be able to gauge this. So you say, a particular amazing research group. So it might be worth like emailing the professor and say, once you know that you're not going to go somewhere else, saying, emailing the professor and saying, thank you again. It was great to meet you. I'm still really excited about this research group. I've decided that I'm going to apply to PhD programs again next year, and I would be eager, to apply again and see how they react to that. Someone got negative vibes communicating with a potential advisor, so decided to decline the offer. What do you think of that? Yeah, bad vibes is a good reason to to decline an offer. Advisors are very important if you're in if you're in a field where you're collaborating very closely with your advisor. And yeah, that's a totally legitimate reason to decide to go somewhere else. Um, Congratulations again to people who are telling me they got in places. Yay. Um, Are fellowship awards better than assistantships? Okay, so going back to the conversation that I was having earlier about different PhD funding models, and I mentioned like, you might be a research assistant on a grant where you might be doing research that isn't exactly what you want to do, but still any research experience is good. So that can be better for some people, unless unless you really want to lean into teaching, it might be better to be funded that way than on a teaching assistantship. Another thing for funding could be a fellowship, either an internal one or an external one. Typically, a fellowship is like, here's your funding, do what you want. And so the benefit of that over an assistantship is that you're getting to do your own thing. You might still get to do your own thing on an assistantship, depending on how close that research funding is to the thing that you want to do. So like, better, maybe, but based on what I just said, maybe also sometimes external fellowships pay more than assistantships do. Can you email a school to ask about the admission status? Yes, you can. Uh, I'm gonna like most of the time, the answer you get back will be your application is under review. You'll be hearing from us soon. But it's not gonna like hurt your chances of admit unless you like are unless you're rude about it or you email them once a week or something like that. But like emailing once to ask about the status of admissions, I think is fine. Just know that I think it's probably unlikely you're going to get any useful information. Is it wrong to contact current students of a potential advisor? Um, no. So I'm going to assume that this is like you've been admitted to some places and you're trying to decide where you want to go, and advisor fit is very important. Um, for what it's worth, when I admit students, when we admit students and I would be their advisor, I offer to connect them to current students. Um, a professor might not necessarily think to do that. Um, you might, if you're in dialogue with that professor anyway, you might ask like something like, I'd really like to find out more about this program from a student perspective. Would you mind connecting me to other students in your lab or something like that? I think that would be a totally reasonable thing to do. Someone is trying to decide between 3 programs, which are all great fits research-wise, and they have virtual open houses. How do you make the most of those and get a sense of the environment of things being online? Ugh, yeah. We've done virtual open houses for the past 2 years. They are not ideal, but it's better than nothing. And the benefit of this is that so you have 3 of them, like, imagine if you were doing 3 in-person like, you might even have to, like, choose between them because sometimes they're at the same time. It can be exhausting. So on the bright side, it'll be a little less exhaustion, for you. So my advice would be, A, engage as much as you can. Like, go to as like, you might not be able to go to everything because you might be working or, whatever it is. But go to as much as you can because it'll just, the more you do, the better feel you'll be able to get for it. And take as much opportunity as you can to engage with the current students in the program. And if they're not actively making space for that, see if you can figure out how to do that on your own. Like, you might be connected to students via email or, but anyway, try to connect, like, because, you can always talk to potential advisors whenever, like set up Zoom meetings with them as you're making your decisions. But it's harder to like get a feel for this sort of culture without really interacting with students. So take as much of an opportunity for that as you can. Someone has been rejected by a dream school. Can you ask the program why they rejected you? And do they usually get an answer? You're probably not going to get an answer. I mean, you're probably not going to get an answer. And yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say. Like, if you have been interacting with a particular faculty member, maybe they might be able to give you some cut, but even then, you're probably just not going to know. I mentioned this in the video that I have about like if what to do after you get rejected from everywhere, and part of it's like you're just not going to know. Yeah, I unfortunately don't really have any advice there except that like you're probably not going to get an answer. I mean, I don't think it necessarily hurt. Well, if you email like the person in charge of admissions, I can basically guarantee you're not going to get an answer because frankly they don't know. If you've been interacting with a particular faculty member, they might be able to give you an answer, but just like make sure the way you ask is very careful. And you might do something like, thank you again, for telling me more about your program. I wanted you to know that I'm actually still very excited about it, and I'm considering applying again next year. I'm wondering if you might have any advice for ways I might improve my application. Like that would be the way to ask. Someone mentioned different. Oh, sorry, scrolled away again. Doop doop. Oh, here we go. You mentioned there are different timelines, but as an international student, you need a visa. What's the worst possible date? So in the United States, the Council for Graduate Schools, I think that's what it's called, has a a standard basically all the graduate schools in the most of the graduate schools in the US agreed that they will not require students to provide decisions before April 15th. Now, I don't think that this includes a requirement for when they have to make decisions, but almost everywhere provides decisions in time for students to make decisions by April 15th. Um, so I would guess that the vast, vast majority of decisions will be out before the end of March. But if you're looking into visa timelines, et cetera, and there's places that you haven't heard back from and you know that you need to because of this, that is a good reason to write them and ask about when they might expect to have decisions. Got offers from all the programs you applied to and accepted one which funding doesn't cover until summer semester. Did you do wrong? I see. You got offered, so you accepted an offer from some place that doesn't guarantee summer funding while you're in your PhD. That's pretty common. I mean, I can't tell you whether you made the right decision because there's 100 different things you might weigh, and funding is only one of them, and summer funding in particular is another one of them. Our program does not guarantee summer funding, but students almost all, like I'm having trouble thinking of an example of a student who didn't have summer funding, either because they have an internship or because there's research assistant lines over the summer or because they're teaching over the summer. We don't guarantee summer funding because we never know what the teaching or grant landscape will look like at any given time. But you might ask them how common it is for students to have summer funding. Is it easier to get PhD by bringing in a full scholarship? Oh, that's an interesting question. So, maybe. So, the thing that I've mentioned before about how one reason for rejections in PhD programs is, bad luck, bad timing. That often has to do with funding. Sometimes it has to do with capacity, like a single faculty member can't advise 10 PhD students at a time, probably. And that might be because of their time as opposed to funding. But sometimes it's funding. Sometimes it's we only have so many teaching assistant lines, or this faculty member doesn't have any grant funding, or that sort of thing. So sometimes it's that. If that is the reason that you might be rejected, then it's possible that you coming in with funding might make that then not relevant. That said, you still have to meet the bar, right? Like if you come in with funding, but you don't you're not a good research fit or you don't meet the bar for or whatever it is, then that's not going to make a difference. But it's possible if they're rejecting students partly because there's not enough funding, then maybe, so it's hard to say maybe. Oh, someone's going to Georgia. Oh, someone is on a campus visit at Georgia Tech. That's where I went. I'm assuming you know that. Everyone else, that's where I went. I don't know. Wave to the T Tower for me while you're there. Congratulations. It's a fantastic school. One college mailed you that you were their top applicant, but they haven't released results. Do you have a good chance for selection? Gosh, I would assume that strikes me as a strange thing to do. Like tell someone they're the top applicant but without telling them they've been admitted. I've never heard of that kind of thing before. But I guess that sounds good. Yeah. Oh, do I have any insights about going to Georgia Tech? What was my experience there? So your experience at any particular university is probably going to be more closely related to the program that you're in and even your individual lab than the university. The things that matter about the University of Georgia Tech are like living in Atlanta and what the campus is. The campus is beautiful. I love it. I loved living in Atlanta. It's such a cool city and not as good as when I lived there because #gentrification, but the cost of living relative to the coolness of the city of Atlanta is quite reasonable. Uh, if you compare it to sort of other cities that are comparably cool, the cost of living in Atlanta, again, I think it's worse, considerably worse now than when I was there, but especially at that time. Um, but yeah, I love Georgia Tech. Um, someone who watched my videos about whether they wanted to do a PhD and now we're deciding between 4 offers. This is my favorite live stream so far. Um, considering that most programs are already doing campus visits, if you haven't heard back from some, does that mean you're probably rejected? I mean, maybe. I don't know. Again, timelines are very different. And also a lot of places are doing virtual visits this year. And if you're doing virtual visits, then like invitations for those might go out later because you don't have to worry about booking flights and making plans and that sort of thing. So I don't know for sure, but yeah, as I've been saying, like it's not a rejection until it's a rejection. I can understand why people start to get very, very nervous at this point if they haven't heard. And I completely understand that. But there's just no way to know. Um, got a chemistry PhD interview at Oxford. Fully technical. Any tips or advice? I don't really know anything about technical interviews. I will be honest that that's not a thing that is really done in my field. I do have a video about PhD interviews in general, if that might be helpful, but I'm not sure how helpful it is for like a technical interview. Um, uh, your offer letter says 50% TA appointment guaranteed for 3 years. If you applied to external fellowships in your first year, would this be welcome? Um, sure. Yeah, I mean, so external fellowships are good for you because it often means that you get to just do whatever you want. External fellowships are good for the department because it saves some money. I mean, I tend to tell students that like if they want to do that, that's cool, but that is not necessarily like their job to try to find money if they're guaranteed funding. But like 50% TA appointment is so that's how appointments work. 50% is a normal assistantship because the idea is that you're working for 50% of your week and doing research and taking classes and stuff for the other 50% of your week. Um, so yeah. Um, interviews with faculty member of a university for a PhD where they were so confident in taking you on, but as soon as you filled out the application form, they ghosted you. How to know the status? Um, if you want to know the status of your application, the only thing that you can do is like email whoever is in charge of applications in that program and ask them. I've been talking about this like most of the time you're going to get an answer that says your application is under review. Potential advisor mentioned that he won't be okay if you go for internships in summer or semester breaks. He wants you to focus on research. Is that a reasonable demand? Oh, this might be discipline specific. This might be, more of a norm in your discipline. But if you, okay, so there's two very good reasons to do internships as a PhD student. One is you might be considering industry jobs afterwards. Like you're not 100% sure you want to be a professor, maybe you want an industry job instead, and doing internships is the best way for you to figure that out. The second reason is because money. You will often make enough money in a summer internship to sort of help you have a better a better like quality of life throughout the 9 months where you're making like PhD student stipend peanuts. So I personally would never stop my students from doing internships, but there are times when like the student needs to finish, right? Like towards the end, like if you need like I might be like, look, I'm not going to stop you from doing an internship, but if you do research over the summer and work on your dissertation, you're going to actually finish in time, and if not, I'm worried about you, right? Because like students always say they're going to keep doing research while they're doing internships, and they almost never do. um so I can't really say like whether this is reasonable or not, but it is worth a discussion, because if either of those two things are true, like you need money, or might consider industry jobs, those are good reasons to do internships, and it's worth a discussion. And maybe this advisor would change their tune if you're exceptionally productive during the rest of the year. um Waitlisted by two universities. Can anything come out of them? Unfortunately, I can't answer this. As I was explaining earlier, typically wait lists mean if students who they've made offers to turn them down, and there's just no way of knowing how likely that is to happen. How much do you think a program advisor's efforts in recruiting you reflect on fit? Hmm. So I'm not completely sure I understand this question. Are you saying like you've been admitted into programs, and how much attention are they how much are they trying to get you to come there? Does that mean something about uh I yeah, so I don't I might not quite understand the question, but but maybe my answer is I don't know. But I'm not quite sure I understand it. So feel free to like rephrase or elaborate. Accepted to two different universities, and you're an international student from Greece. Oh, sorry, this isn't a question. This is a uh good. Congratulations. Yay. um had an interview for biomedical sciences PhD in the US, and three professors interviewed you, um, making you sure that you'll get admission, but you haven't received a notice. What should you do? Um, Unfortunately, again, there's not really much you can do but wait here. Oh, someone else said thank you. You're very welcome. How do you deal with snobby or arrogant professors who constantly look down on their students? Um, I don't know. I mean, there's jerks in every profession, right? I think a lot of academia and professors get bad reputations for this kind of behavior. Um I mean, it's like I feel like I don't know anyone like, and I'm thinking like from when I was a PhD student, like yes, I can think of a couple of professors in my program maybe where I sort of felt that way about them. And I know people in my field who I also feel that way about. And if there was someone who acted like that and was, a friend of mine or something like that, I would absolutely tell them, because I think that kind of thing is unacceptable. Um, so I mean, I don't really know how to like advise someone for how to deal with it, except just like know that not everyone is like that. I mean, and I think students should stand up for themselves within the constraints of keeping themselves safe, etc. But yeah, that sucks that there are people like that. How do you politely turn down offers? Professors were generally nice to you, but you've accepted your top choice. So, first of all, the kindest thing that you can do is tell them as soon as possible. Like, if you've already accepted, if you've already accepted an offer somewhere and you haven't told them yet, like email them as soon as we get off of this call. And the reason I say this is because, again, we were just talking about wait lists, and like wait lists are often based on students turning down offers so they can offer to more students. And so it is a kindness to let them know as soon as possible. And then just know that like it's fine. It happens. Everyone knows it's going to happen. And when I say we, I mean me and other professors who are nice, reasonable people. Um, we want people to go to the best place for them. And the reasons why someone somewhere might be the best place, there's lots of them that have nothing to do with that professor, Like, you might decide to go somewhere because of the weather or because your partner can get a job there or because it's closer to family, like things that have nothing to do with the program or the professor at all. And we know that this happens. And even if it is, there's a professor at this other university who's a better fit for me is also a perfectly fine reason. Sometimes there are people that we make offers to that I actively think should go somewhere else because I think that there's like, we might admit them because if they really wanted to come here, like they're awesome but sometimes I personally think they should go somewhere else because of like a better advisor fit, for example. So don't feel bad. Seriously, do not feel bad. And unless the professor like and I said this earlier because someone brought this up, if they're not nice about it, like if they're a jerk about it or if they like make you feel bad, then like good for you, you dodged a bullet because imagine what they would be like as an advisor. So you should tell them how much you appreciated meeting them or talking to them or whatever, and how much you are looking forward to being their colleague in your discipline as your career continues. Um, a program where the professor oh, sorry, wait, there's something above this. Um, if a school waives English requirements for you, does not supplying it reduce your chances? I'm not totally sure the answer to this, but if it's kind of like GRE scores, like some places will waive or don't require GRE scores, and so if you don't provide them, it doesn't make a difference. I'm not sure in this particular situation though. Um, a program where the professor you want to work with is actively trying to convince you to join their lab. Um, that's great. That's a good sign. It means they really want you there, and them really wanting you there is a good sign. I mean, should that be a reason to pick one place over another? I don't know. Um, and does that speak to fit? It could speak to all kinds of things. It could speak to what that professor is like in terms of communicating. It could speak to um how many students that professor has admitted. Like it could be that like you were the only good person for them in the pool that year, and so like they really really want you to come, whereas the other place maybe they made offers to a few different people and they're expecting that someone might not come, and they still hope you will come, but they know that at least one person is going to, right? It could be something like that. It could, who knows? I mean, and also fit is like a perception thing. But if they've admitted you, they want you there. But if someone is like being really nice and really trying to convince you to come and they really want you there, like that might be something that you take into consideration because it might mean something about how like welcomed or valued you will feel. But this, there's all kinds of things that matter for this decision. Is reaching out to professors recommended when an application is pending? To professors, I mean, if you applied back in December and now you just haven't gotten a decision yet, and you want to know something about the status of your application, I would reach out to like whoever's in charge of admissions to ask about status as opposed to individual professors because frankly they might not even know. And also they're not like an individual professor isn't gonna like tell you that your application has been rejected or so, right? Like that's just not what the individual professors are doing. The GRE is optional. Does it have a positive impact on the application if you have it? If you have a really high GRE score and it's optional, then like sure, go ahead and admit it. And I personally don't care that much about high GRE scores. I just don't think they matter that much. But a lot of people feel very differently. So like how big of an impact it's going to have will depend on whoever's reviewing your application and how they feel about it. But if you think it's a good score and it's going to help your application and you have it, then like sure. Not sure if you're ready for the commitment of a PhD program. You thought about a master's instead, but is that a waste of time due to lack of funding? It's not as much of a waste of time as starting a PhD and then deciding you don't want one. If you're not sure, I mean, if you're not sure about a PhD, um, especially if you're not sure if like research is a thing that you want to do and how much you're going to like it, then yeah, getting a master's degree is a good way to do that. That said, I understand why people might not want to do that because, um, you know, masters are often self-funded or funding isn't guaranteed or whatever. So I get that. But starting a PhD program, if you're already having doubts, worries me a little bit. And I also want to make really clear, like, I get that this happens and I get why this happens, but I just feel like I have to say it really sucks for the program and the professors applying to PhD programs knowing that you probably don't want a PhD and you want to leave with a master's, but you're doing it so that you can get funding. It just sucks so much. It's such a waste of resources, and it's such like advising a brand new PhD student is a lot of work. It is a I'm not so I'm not talking about resources in terms of money. I'm talking about resources in terms of time. So like a student graduating without finishing their PhD and maybe they don't publish anything, like it's like it's sunk costs. That said, sometimes a student starts a PhD really thinking they want a PhD, and then it turns out that it's not right for them. That is completely fine. That happens sometimes, and we know that happens sometimes. But like knowing from the get-go that you don't really want one, oh, that kind of sucks. But you know, a master's degree is a good way to get some research experience and figure out if it's sort of for you. You know, another thing that might happen is like you start a master's degree, and then you figure out pretty fast that that's what you want to do. Sometimes you can like slip into the PhD program in that same. We have multiple students in our PhD program who started out in as master's students. Oh, you meant reaching out to express interest in the professor's research while your application is pending. Well, if your application is pending and if it's been pending for a while, I assume. So like it's under review, and I would assume that if there were faculty members that you were interested in, you talked about that in your statement of purpose. I'm trying to think of how I would react to this. Like if someone at this point, because again, this is very late in the, like I would expect most admissions decisions, at least in the US, are coming out in the next few weeks. So it's very late in the process at this point. And so, you know, I doubt this would, if someone reached out to me now, I would just respond by saying your application is under review. Yeah. You know, I can't tell you that like it wouldn't matter. It might depend on discipline and et cetera. But it's just so late in the process at this point that I don't think it would make a big difference. Plus, you know, again, they should know that you're interested in their research because someone read your statement of purpose where you said you were interested in their research. What GRE score is considered high? I have no idea. I don't even know what the GRE score ranges are right now. Also, I think I also just don't care about GRE scores personally. Is it common for professors to urge you to reply to admission offers as soon as possible? What can that mean? Yes. You do not have to. They should not pressure you to, but asking you to is perfectly acceptable. And as soon as you know, it is very kind for you to respond as soon as possible. The reason for this is because sometimes there are either like there's planning that needs to happen for next year in terms of funding, or but the big reason is there might be students on a wait list. And if you turn down an offer, that might mean that another student gets an offer. And so as soon as you know, again, you might not know yet, and that's fine. And they shouldn't pressure you to give a response before April 15th or whenever that deadline is. But if you know, it is very kind to go ahead and give them an answer. Are you planning to do a new version of what to do when you're rejected? It's sad that people expect you to do research for free after admissions. I'm not sure what would be in a new version. That's sort of my advice. I hope I was very clear in that video that it's not an expectation that you do research for free. I think I was pretty clear in saying that a lot of people that whole like doing research, like volunteering research thing is not a thing that should be expected, and that I completely understand that most people can't do that. I hope that was clear because I do feel that way. Um, I want to give all of the potential options to people. Some people can do that. Um, I think it kind of sucks that, and I also gave other suggestions, things like um, getting it, working in the field, even things like writing blog posts or, that sort of thing. But also, again, another big reason for being rejected might just be bad timing, bad luck. And so if that's the case, then applying again, um, should be fine. Also, you say you have a bunch of industry experience, so like keep doing that. Does an MS from a high school high high ranking school better from your for academic career, or doing a PhD from a low ranking school? Well, so the answer to this is pretty simple. It depends on whether the job that you're trying to get requires a PhD or not. Yeah, that's basically the answer there. Because if you are trying to get a job that requires a PhD, then it doesn't matter what the school you got your MS would be from, because you would need a PhD. Um, it will negatively affect on your admissions if you're not working full time, but have worked full time in academics. I'm really sorry, I don't understand this question. Maybe rephrase. I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry. Is there any chance to understand how many PhD positions exist in universities? No, probably not. If you want to try to read the tea leaves and figure this out, you could look at, usually most programs have a list of all of their current PhD students on a website somewhere. So you could, and usually it will say like what year they are, what year they started, or something like that. And so you could try to find out how big their typical incoming cohorts are. Um, though most places don't have like um, standard, most places make more admissions offers than students who actually come. So that's only sort of part of the picture. What advice would I give to students who end up not getting any offers at the end of the application cycle? I'm sorry. I have a whole video about this. It's like, you've been rejected from PhD programs, now what? So it has a bunch of different suggestions. One thing is that you don't know. So this is unfortunate, but you just don't know. You're just not going to know why this happened. So the first thing you should do is make sure that that if you're going to apply again, that your applications are as good as they can possibly be. But if the applications were as good as they could possibly be, then either there's something that is weak about your application, or it was bad timing, bad luck. Like, we rejected students this year who absolutely 100% were completely qualified to be in our program, but we can only make so many offers. And it could very well be that if that person applied next year, or if they'd applied 2 years ago, they would have gotten in. So it could be that that's the case. It could also be that there's some weakness in your application somewhere. Um, uh, in which case, like, sometimes there's just not anything that you can do. But I make some suggestions. I just talked about this a little bit, I guess, because of that question. Some suggestions for things that you might be able to do, which, again, to be clear, should not be do research for free. There are other possibilities as well, and one might be, if you don't already have one, get a master's degree. Which, again, I understand why people don't want to do that too. You graduate at the end of summer. Should you let someone know at the PhD program that you're going to hit your degree? Are you Oh, you're an undergrad. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I don't think this will matter. This probably won't matter. If you so once you have admissions decisions and you decide where you want to go, you might want to let them know this, but I don't see why it would matter. Initial mail professor responded positively and invited you to apply for the program, but then didn't respond to mail after you submitted your application. What should you do? Um, Wait until you hear back about your application. I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. Um, Sometimes professors just lose emails. Sometimes, it could also be that like once your application's under review, your application's under review, so there's not anything else to say. Um, I mean, you can always follow up if you haven't yet, but I think you just wait. Um, Got mail from a school you applied to that you've been waitlisted, but some days later you got mail from a PI requesting an interview. Does that mean their first choice applicant declined? No way to know that. Unfortunately, who knows how different programs do this kind of thing. It could be that they want to rank their people on the wait list. It's kind of hard to say. Oh my gosh, I got to the very bottom of the list. Okay, how about this? I can hang out for 5 more minutes. So if because usually I try to do about an hour and a half on these and we're almost there. So if there are more questions, I can answer a few more. Okay, let's see. Um, Worked full time in academia, but presently due to temporary issues are working as an online tutor. Will this affect negatively in your admissions? Um, I no. Or rather, I don't see how this would make any kind of difference. Um, you applied to my university CS program. Oh, good luck. I'm not in CS, so I don't know anything about how their admissions go. um, um, oh, to clarify, yeah, okay, good. I'm glad that my video was clear about that. There's pressure from I get it. And so I have to say, like there are a lot of things that are unfair about this process. There just are. And I've gone on rants before about elitism in academia, which means PhD admissions in addition to everything else. Um, and some people have opportunities for research experience when they're in undergrad, and some don't. And some have opportunities that others don't, and it's unfair and it sucks. Um, and I don't really know sort of what to say or do about that. It's something that I think a lot about. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, if you, well, I don't really want to. I would, just like do the best with with what you have, right? And if you don't, and I think in my video about statements of purpose, I talk about this a little bit, but like if you don't have research experience, like the best thing that you can do in your application is show that you know what research is and why you want to do it, and that sort of thing. And again, I have admitted our program has admitted students into our PhD program who are my advisees who did not have any research experience really. It is not unheard of. It might be harder to get into like whatever you consider like the top programs or whatever, but again, that is not nec- always the most important thing. There are sometimes like jewels of professors who are amazing advisors and really well respected and awesome, who are at like lower ranked universities for lots of different reasons that have nothing to do with how awesome they are. So I would also encourage people to sort of broaden your perspectives of where you might consider getting a PhD as well. And I think that's one of the pieces of advice I give in that video too. Does industry work experience improve one's chances? Sometimes. It's one of those things that is reviewed, part of an application like anything else. Graduated with a double A and transferred dot dot dot. GPA wasn't a but. So strengths and applications can always make up for weaknesses, and a GPA grades is one part of an application. If you have more qualified applicants than your program wants to enroll, how do you decide who and how many to accept? Sometimes this depends. So in my field, advisor, like admissions are tied to advisor, or in my program, admissions are tied to advisors, and this is a capacity thing and it's a funding thing. And how do you decide between those applicants sometimes has to do with advisor fit. Sometimes it has to do with like research interests plus funding fit. All it can be all kinds of things. And so again, sometimes you are perfectly qualified and you still get rejected, and that's just a timing thing. Um, yeah. Are published books considered research experience? I don't know. I guess it depends on the book. Was there research that went into the book? So a thing that I often say about like publications in general, and I don't know about a book, but like it's not the publication I mean, to me, it's not the publication that matters. It's the stuff that went into the publication, like the stuff that you did to result in a publication that matters, and that's the research experience. Um, can you be accepted to another PhD program if you studied for a year in another country? Oh, do you mean like you're in a PhD program now? Could you transfer into another one? That is a thing that happens sometimes. In fact, there's a student who's a first year in our PhD program who did a year at another one and then decided he wanted to switch fields. How many research projects as an undergrad would you consider good? Is one published paper good? Oh, I think I just answered this question for you, which is that you shouldn't have to have publications to be admitted into a PhD program, and one research project is good if it's a good research project. The more that it is, like the more that you do on it, the better. So like, you doing some data now, like, okay, so here's a good example. An undergrad working in a research lab who like does some data analysis and is in the squishy middle of a published paper. Like, that's great. You did some data analysis, you got some experience, you have a published paper. But an undergrad who does an honors thesis where they did their entire research project, they led it, but it's not a published paper yet because they just did it. That second student, in theory, has more research experience than the first student, and they can talk about it. And that's the kind of thing a PhD student would do, like doing your own study. That isn't to say that if you have that first kind of experience, it's bad and you have to have the second kind. But if you're comparing those two, the publication doesn't matter. I hope that helps. But again, anything is good. Anything that helps you know that what research is and that that's what you want to do. All right, last question. If there are any more questions, you can put them in the comments of this video that's about to appear once the live stream is over, and I can answer it in chat there. Received an offer letter for a PhD program, but you're still waiting to hear back. How would you reach out without sounding like you're rushing them? Well, first of all, that PhD program, okay, if it's in the US, is probably not requiring you to have a decision until April 15th. They might ask you for a decision kindly, and it's kind to tell them when you know, but they can't require you. Again, in the US, and I don't know how it's different in other places. But you might want to be making a decision sooner for whatever reason. You can reach out and say, "Hi, I'm just writing to inquire about the timeline for admissions decisions because I have another offer and I would like to be able to weigh all of my options." It's fine. I mean, they'll probably just write you back and say your application is under review, but it doesn't necessarily hurt to ask. Okay. Well, gosh, I think that's it. For those of you who are still waiting to hear back from PhD admissions, very best of luck to all of you. I know that this can be very stressful. So I encourage you to exercise self-care in whatever that means for you. For those of you who have been admitted into programs and are trying to make decisions, best of luck with that. I'm sure that whatever decision you make will be awesome. And for those of you who have gotten rejection so far, just know that it is not the end of the world. If you haven't heard me tell the story before, the first time that I applied to PhD programs, I was rejected from every single one of them. And now it's a very long time later, but I'm about to get tenure. So, it gets better. Again, if you had more questions, I saw one just pop up. Leave this in, well, actually, I might be able to see the chat, or you can leave it in a comment on this video when it posts in just a moment, and I'm happy to answer any more questions in the comments. All right, have a nice rest of your Sunday, everyone. And yeah, feel free to continue to leave questions if you have any on YouTube. All right. Bye bye.